Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Norm Rosenblum. I'm the Scientific Director of the Institute for Nutrition, Metabolism, and Diabetes of the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, and it's my pleasure to be here today to moderate this session in which we're going to be focusing on the outputs from a team grant opportunity that was funded through CIHR with partners. And this funding opportunity related to the theme of bariatric care, which in this context really involved various modalities that would be directed at the management of severe forms of obesity, which could include bariatric surgery, but not necessarily. I want to let you know, if you don't know, that the Institute for Nutrition and Metabolism and Diabetes has a major strategic focus on food and health and healthy body weights, and it's in that light that this funding opportunity arose, as well as a number of other opportunities that our institute has focused on since CIHR was created back in the year 2000. Today we're going to have two speakers who represent and lead two of the three teams that were funded through this funding opportunity, and I'm going to introduce each in turn when they come up to speak, and they're going to speak with us for about 20-25 minutes each, and then we'll have some time for questions and discussion, and that'll bring us to the top of the hour. So our first speaker today is Dr. Geoff Ball. Dr. Ball received a Bachelor of Science in Dietetics from the University of British Columbia, and completed a dietetic internship with Capital Health in Edmonton, and then a PhD in Nutrition and Metabolism from the University of Alberta. He then completed postdoctoral training at the University of Southern California, and went back to Edmonton to join the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Alberta. And I think, Geoff, you told me you've been back in Edmonton since 2002 or four. Geoff now serves as the founding director of the Pediatric Center for Weight and Health, which is a multidisciplinary weight management clinic at the Stollery Children's Hospital. And obviously, as you will see, he runs a very productive investigative program. And so it's a pleasure to welcome you, and we look forward to your talk.
Well, don't clap yet. So first of all, I just want to thank Norm and Mary Jo and Keely from the INMD for hosting us and inviting Andre and myself to present. Probably like Andre, I don't want to steal your thunder, but we're very appreciative of the resources and the support we've had over the last several years. It's nice to come together and share the work that we've been doing and to learn about what other teams have been up to. So thank you. I just have a few disclosures. And because the podium's over here and the slides are over there, and because I'm older than when we first got the grant, my vision isn't as good, so I can't even read these verbatim. Well, I shouldn't read them verbatim anyway, but just so you're aware. A few disclosures. The folks who funded our... yeah, I can see it. Oh, pretty good. Yeah. Thanks. These are the folks that helped to fund our research. We've been fortunate to have funding not just from CIHR, but Obesity Canada, Public Health Agency of Canada, and the others that you see up on the list. There's no specific commercial support, although I have had some administrative support through Alberta Health Services and the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Alberta. And the statement regarding mitigating potential bias is relevant here as well. So with that, what I wanted to do today was to really just give you a highlight of the progress to date that we've had as a team, as well as the ongoing research to characterize and to manage severe obesity. So these are the objectives, the overall global objectives from our grant way back in the day. So we had two main foci. One, improve our understanding, and the second being to improve the management through some novel interventions. And one of the first things I want to do is to acknowledge our team. And as you can see by the long list of people here, there are quite a few of us. And to be honest with you, it's been, I guess I'm kind of mid-career or getting up to my sort of senior in career. And it's the second big team that I've led. And it's been an interesting one because in a lot of ways I've been like the banker. We've got a number of projects that are led by other people. We had one project that we led in Edmonton and another one I'm co-leading, but a lot of the work has been around organization and around teamwork and relationships. And I'll talk about some science today, but I wanted to emphasize the team aspect of the work that we do and the sorts of things we've done to, I think, strengthen our team, strengthen existing relationships that we have, and as well as to develop new ones. So the other thing I wanted to point out is that if some of you are more junior in your career, when we submitted the grant, we had a long list of people that we included. We had a lot of letters from a lot of stakeholders, and we had some people sort of join the grant as projects went along, and other people sort of dropped away. And for me, that was the first sort of experience of doing that, and not really sure how to manage that, because of course, different people have different expectations. But the one thing that was key for us as our team moved along was communication. And that's communication in person, it's emails, it's being online, having a presence, and that doesn't just happen. I think when you write a grant, it's easy to talk about that, but to actually operationalize it over a 4 or 5 year period is a lot of work. So even though I might have been the banker, I was also, between a couple of us, I'll talk about in a moment about who else has been involved in this part. It's been one of those things, it's like having a garden where you can plant the vegetables and flowers, but you need to tend it, you need to garden ongoing to bear fruit at the end, and I'll talk about some of the fruits that have come from these labors. But just to give you an idea of the things we've done over the past few years, we've had annual general meetings as a group, and not everyone can attend, but the team leaders would attend, provide project updates. It ended up being a great forum for trainees to present, because a lot of the projects were led by master's, PhD, or postdoc level trainees. Another thing that we did during those annual general meetings was have something called office hours. And this is one of our team members who had experience from another conference. And we ended up having opportunities for students who were part of our team to meet with other senior team members at these gatherings. So we'd have this sort of matchmaking stuff, matchmaking opportunity before our annual general meeting, where we'd say, let us know if you have any students, and then we'd ask our faculty, is anyone interested in the matchmaking, and then we'd sort of do this, these quick dates, like 15, 20 minutes. And we weren't really sure how it was going to go when we first started doing it, but the feedback we had from the faculty as well as from the students was really positive, because it was a chunk of time where you could spend and pick the brain of someone who you've read their work, and I mean, we've all been there, right? You're a student and you're thinking, oh yeah, Dr. Rosenblum, he's so amazing, and the work he publishes is fantastic, and then you meet him, and it either reinforces the belief you had, or at a very least, it's an opportunity to connect and build your network. And we wanted to provide that for our trainees. And we did that for trainees within our team, but then if we had our annual general meeting, we had one in Calgary, one in Toronto, and one in, where was the other one we did? Ottawa. We also opened it up to trainees who were at that local institution or in that city, so they didn't have to be necessarily a part of a team. And that was another way to build community and build connections beyond just our team. And I included a couple other pictures on the slide here, because one of the main ways in which we communicated as a group and shared was through a blog. And I'm not a social media darling by any sense of the imagination, but it was a reminder that this is a neat way to stay connected. And it required a lot of work and time. And I want to highlight the work of Nicole Gehring, who's here in the audience. Has been our research coordinator from the beginning, and now she's moving on to her own graduate studies. And it wouldn't have happened without Nicole. I think that there are people within your teams who are the glue that make things happen, and sometimes they come and go, and sometimes they're there for the duration of a project. And it's a lot of the work that I'm going to share with you today is a testament to the work that Nicole has done, that we've done together and within our team. So thank you for all your work. And she was also the chair of our subcommittee that we had struck early on around social media. So anytime we had a blog post, we had a couple other team members who would review things and have ideas. She interviewed people on our team, so you can see on the slide here, that's a picture of Amy McPherson, one of our co-PIs. So we wanted another way to profile team members beyond just the research, but also what they're all about, how they got into research. So again, creating a bit of a culture of community. And then along with all the other blog posts that we've done, we also do regular highlights of publications, not just related to our team, but the publications of people on our team that may relate directly or indirectly to obesity. So we were fortunate that we have a good group of people, collegial. We like to work together. We like to spend time together. So they're actually, of course, a lot of fun, and that makes our work a lot more enjoyable. So this is what we've been working on for the past 3 to 4 years. Within our team, originally we had 7 projects that we proposed in our original application, and we ended up adding one because the project we added here, I think, is number 6. That's a surveillance project, and Nicole, I think, is presenting a poster out in the poster area related to these data. And that was an opportunity from the Canadian Pediatric Society has a surveillance program, so we sort of ended up including that project within the bigger scheme. But we've got a study related to prevalence of severe obesity. That included data from Ontario, risk factor clustering, predictors of treatment initiation, and you can see here the different status of those projects. Some were really ones that we got off the ground right away and were quick to finish, and then of course when you pull all that data, whether it's administrative data or clinical data, there's lots of other questions that can be answered. So we've got a number of secondary analyses that we're currently working on. Some other projects are ongoing, and number 4, Amy McPherson, I think, is presenting some data from that project. The surveillance is ongoing, and at the bottom we've got 2 interventions. These are clinical trials that are ongoing, and if anyone's done a clinical trial, you know how much time they can take to develop and to roll out. And of course, I'm not going to have time to talk about every project, so what I thought I would do is just give you a high-level input on, or high-level feedback or information about a few of them. And if you're at all interested, at the end, our webpage for our blog is posted. So all the stuff that I'm sharing, all the output, it's all uploaded onto our blog. So thanks for doing that, Nicole. This is a picture of Catherine Birkin. She's one of our co-PIs, and we were lucky that, or I guess timing worked out really well, because one of Catherine's roles is leading, I think, the only primary care-based pediatric research network in the country called Target Kids, which some of you are probably familiar with. So through Target Kids and through some other opportunities, she had access to some data. And this is one of the projects. I think we've got 3 or 4 publications that have come out of her group, and mostly led by her trainees. And this is one I wanted to highlight. It was published last year in the Canadian Journal of Public Health. It's cross-sectional data from 2 cohorts, Target Kids, as well as Better Outcomes Registry and Network. So if this is a pregnancy, infancy, and early childhood registry here within Ontario. And you can see the sample here, 4,400 kids. And for those of you who don't do pediatric research, or might not be that familiar, we know very little about boys and girls 5 years of age and under with respect to obesity in Canada. So this is a nice contribution that Catherine and her colleagues have been able to do. And just briefly, what they did is they looked at the prevalence of severe obesity in this population, and you can see that the prevalence varies depending on the definition you use. We spent a lot of time on our calls and in discussions and with analyses around how do you define severe obesity in kids, and maybe I'm not going to bore you with some of the details right now, but if you're interested, we can talk about it later. But I think we're getting better at defining it, at least consistently in Canada. And I think the definition we're leaning towards now, using more and more often, is a WHO cutoff of greater than 3 Z-score BMI. And the prevalence they reported in these young children was a bit lower than what other people have reported in other places, but there's different ages, different cutoffs, different thresholds. But in general, BMI is still used across the different studies. This one is hot off the presses. I'm not sure if you listened to CBC radio over the past few weeks, but Catherine Morrison and I did coast to coast to coast radio interviews. I think 25 stations had interviewed either Catherine or myself, talking about this study that was published in the Lancet Child and Adolescent Health. So it's probably the biggest profile paper we've published to date, and it's really led by Catherine and Stasia Hadjianakis, who's here from Ontario. They did a lot of analyses, and this is a nice complement to some ongoing work that Catherine had been leading from McMaster for a number of years, and that's the CAN-POWER study, the Canadian Pediatric Weight Management Registry. This includes 9 or 10 clinical multidisciplinary sites across the country. What we were interested in is the relationship between obesity status and so we classified boys and girls according to their weight status, as well as the health status. And I think one of the presenters earlier today, at least one, has talked about the Edmonton obesity staging system. Previous research that some of us had been involved in, we pediatricified that classification, so we have EOS-P, that we're now using, and at least in Ottawa and in Hamilton, they're using it for clinical purposes. And you can see here that we use the 4 M's, which is work that Arya Sharma had developed in adults a number of years ago. So you can see how we ranked boys and girls according to those risk factors. So metabolic, that would be things like high blood pressure, dyslipidemia, insulin resistance. Mechanical would be things related to breathing or movement. Mental health, typically anxiety, depression. And we were searching for the 4th M, so social milieu was the one that we ended up with. So these would be things like quality of life, experiences with bullying. And so at the end of the day, CanPower includes about 1,300 or 1,400 boys and girls from across the country. It's ongoing. This was an opportunity to look at some cross-sectional data. About 850 boys and girls were included. You can see here, these are the characteristics of kids. Most have severe obesity. Most had EOSP staging 2 and 3, so these would be the presence of those 4 M's. And in general, we found that metabolic risk factors tended to be more common than metabolic, which were more common than social milieu, which were more common than mechanical. And one of the key things we were interested in looking at was whether, as you go across BMI categories, do these risk factors track as BMI tracks? And it depends on which M you're talking about. So for mechanical and social milieu, for sure, as you went up obesity, or went up BMI categories from overweight to obesity to severe obesity, those risk factors became more common. But for metabolic and mental health, it didn't matter as you went higher. They were high to begin with, and they basically stayed high across those different categories of weight status. So in the end, it gives us some practical or some potential clinical application of how this can be done beyond BMI to look at health risks in boys and girls. This is a picture of Arnaldo Perez. Arnaldo did his PhD with me in Edmonton, and one of the projects that we led related to treatment initiation, or really predicting enrollment. So in Alberta, we're fortunate with Alberta Health Services. It's a provincial healthcare system. There's one way in which to refer boys and girls with obesity for weight management in the province. We had access to that data, and we, over 3 different multidisciplinary clinics in our province, we had access to all the referral information. It's basically one page that goes to one person. They enter it all, so it's a very straightforward process. And within that information, or within that data, over that 3-year time frame, there were just over 2,000 boys and girls referred for weight management in Alberta. And there's a specific process that all 3 clinics share that streamlines families into care. So the first cup of water there just highlights that those are the number referred, but as you go through the cups, you'll see that water drops off. So there's different stages along the way. Families attend orientation sessions. They book the appointment at the orientation. They attend the orientation. They book a clinic appointment. They attend the clinic appointment. So a number of steps to get to, and at the end you can see there that only around 40% of boys and girls ended up stepping foot in the clinic. So the flip side is 60% of kids who are referred never show up or never make it to the clinic. So for us, that relates to access, availability, perceptions of the service. And in the end of the day, we were interested in, well, what are the things that predicted whether boys and girls would actually initiate care? And one of the big things we found was time. So the longer the time lag, I think within the big brochure that came with your package, one of the issues is around accessibility and how long it takes to access a lot of these services. And it can take months and years. So the longer that lag happens, the less likely boys and girls in our study were less likely to initiate care. And then when it comes to the subgroups or the characteristics of families who were referred, in general, those families who had lower household incomes were less likely to actually attend, and those boys and girls who had the most severe cases of obesity were least likely to attend. So there's some more attention we need to pay to how we orient our services and how we streamline families in a timely way and address the needs that they have to meet those needs of those who are most vulnerable. The last study I'm going to talk about is something I think everyone should have got a little card within the package when you registered. And this is a picture of Louise Mass. Louise is at the University of British Columbia, and she's leading a project related to AIM2B. And AIM2B is an online intervention that has been supported by a number of different groups across the country. And you can see here that, well, it's for youth in general. That's how it's being marketed across the country. But within the context of our team grant, Louise is interested in leading a study to look at whether the addition of a health coach to an app that is designed to help boys and girls make healthy lifestyle choices, whether that additional support is beneficial. So we're doing a trial now where we're recruiting boys and girls from 5 or 6 weight management clinics from across the country. And then they're being randomized to receive AIM2B with or without the coach to see if that leads to better adherence and improved lifestyle changes along the way. So this is very much at the beginning stages. The recruitment has started, and I believe enrollment, it's probably just within the last 2 months that that's been going. So this will be one of those studies that goes on a little bit longer, and maybe, given the length of follow-up, may go beyond 2020. And here's another screenshot, and I believe they have a booth set up just down the hall if you wanted more information from Janice McDonald, who's leading that project. So what's next? Like I said, we have a number of projects that have secondary analyses, and we've got some projects to finish. But the other thing is, this team grant came at an interesting time for us who do work in obesity management in Canada, because the CanPower study has been an ongoing thing. The team grant was an opportunity to bring a lot of similar people together around a different issue, slightly different projects, provided an opportunity to expand the number of people who are working and have a mix of senior, mid-career, and junior people working in the field. So CanPower, I know Catherine Morrison isn't here, but I know there are plans to extend CanPower. We submitted a project grant to CIHR last fall around attrition, because again, coming back to that issue of engagement that I mentioned before, it was ranked middle of the road, so we're going to do some updates and resubmit that. But a lot of people who were involved in our team grant are now involved in that attrition-related study. And then finally, we're extending our clinical collaborations, and one of the big projects we're taking on over the next probably 2 years is updating the clinical practice guidelines for managing pediatric obesity. So some of you are probably familiar that the adults have been working on updating the adult guidelines for quite a while, and those will be forthcoming, and we're basically going to dovetail our work with theirs. And our first in-person meeting is tomorrow. So I think it was mentioned in the program as a closed meeting. It wasn't meant to be closed to be, okay, well, we've got a little club and we're going to keep the club small. We really just have 5 people who don't know what the heck we're doing yet. So we need to stay a little bit focused so we don't, so we make sure we have our act together before we branch out. And our goal is to be inclusive and provide lots of opportunities for people to participate if they're so interested. So with that, links to our blog, Twitter, Facebook. Like I said, most of the information I shared today is up on our blog and is open to be sharing. So again, kudos to Nicole, and thanks to all of you for being here today.
I think we'll leave questions to the end after we've had our 2 speakers, and feel free, Geoff, to take a seat. As you wish. There are many seats available, so.
Close to the screen now.
Yes. Let's welcome our next speaker, Andre Tchemoff, who is a professor in the School of Nutrition at the University of Laval. Dr. Tchemoff received his initial training in biochemistry and physiology endocrinology at the University of Laval, and then completed postdoctoral training in molecular endocrinology at Laval and then at the University of Vermont. Dr. Tchemoff is interested in the metabolic complications of obesity, with a particular emphasis on the physiology of adipose tissue and regional distribution in men and women. And so thank you, Andre, for being here, and we look forward to hearing how your research is moving along.
Thank you. Thank you for this kind invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here today to provide a status update on our REMISSION study, which we did with the funding of the team grant in Bariatric Care. So thank you. So these are my disclosures. I received funding from the following companies, and part of the work that I will be presenting today has been funded by Johnson & Johnson. However, the sponsor had no input in the study design or conducting the study, collecting data or analyzing the data, or even deciding on what was going to be presented today. So these are the common surgical approaches that are used in humans to induce weight loss. So on the left, you have the gastric banding, which is an installation of a device in the upper part of the stomach to induce a restriction The second surgery is the sleeve gastrectomy, where a large part of this, the parietal section of the stomach is removed to create a sleeve, which also creates a restrictive effect. The third one is the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, which creates a small pouch of the stomach, and the jejunum is connected directly to this pouch. So the change in the stomach creates a restrictive effect, and then you have a slight malabsorptive effect that is created by the connection of the jejunum to this small pouch. The third one is the biliopancreatic diversion with duodenal switch. That's the one for which we have a lot of experience in Quebec City. And you see the restrictive effect is created by the sleeve gastrectomy, and then the terminal ileum is connected directly to the stomach after the pylorus. And I can't point here. I don't know. I don't have a pointer, but the biliopancreatic secretions are derived to the last 100 centimeters of the terminal ileum. So the drawing is not at scale there. So the rule of thumb in bariatric surgery is that the metabolic benefits of the surgery increase with the risk of side effects related to the malabsorption. So the choice of surgery really has to balance these two phenomena. Now, this is from the previous report card on obesity by the Obesity Network. We have a lot of work to do for access to bariatric surgery in Canada. That was a previous version where we operated one patient out of 183 who was eligible for the bariatric surgery. So access is a key issue that we need to work on. But also there's a lot of variation from province to province in terms of the operation that is chosen to perform. So, for example, here you have Quebec and Ontario in the middle, and Ontario did, at the time of submission, 2012, 2013, mostly gastric bypass surgery, whereas you had in Quebec province, you had Montreal doing gastric banding, and you had the little black bar was the biliopancreatic diversion in Quebec City. So these choices are multifactorial. They involve a number of factors, including insurance coverage, patient preference, but mostly practice patterns among the surgeons and preference of the surgical team. So the rationale for our study was that by generating better knowledge on each of the procedures, we would have a stronger scientific rationale to choose the best operation for the right person in every location. Also, we wanted to address the high heterogeneity in the response to metabolic surgery. There was no longitudinal control trial comparing the three most performed operations, the sleeve gastrectomy, the Roux-en-Y, and the biliopancreatic diversion. And we really wanted to get to the mechanism, the physiological mechanisms underlying surgery-induced changes. So we designed a REMISSION trial. REMISSION stands for Reaching Enduring Metabolic Improvements by selecting surgical interventions in obese individuals. And the three PIs, Dr. Bierto, surgeon colleague, and Dr. Richard, and a list of investigators that you will see on the next slide. And really the overall objective was to address determinants of metabolic recovery in each of the three surgeries that we had targeted in humans and relevant animal models as well. So this is the structure of the grant. It had a clinical core component. It was a large clinical trial of 300 patients in various surgical arms plus controls that were followed for an initial duration of 3 years, and then there was an animal core component. These two components fed into three research axes. The first one was metabolism, the second one microbiota, and the third one gut-brain, and you have the list of investigators involved in each of these axes. And our primary outcomes were weight loss and remission of type 2 diabetes. So today I'm going to discuss results from the clinical core and vignettes from each of the axes. I will have the honor actually of presenting results from various collaborators who were involved in each of these research areas. I will not have time to address animal data. We have a lot of those, but in the interest of time, I will focus on human data. So the clinical course study, here's the protocol. We had a detailed testing list that we did before the surgery and a number of tests that were performed, again, 4 months, 8 months, 12 months, 24 months, and 36 months after the surgery. Today I'm going to be presenting up to 24 months data. And of course, during the clinical core study, we had subsets of patients that participated in the testing and clinical testing and sampling for all the mechanistic studies that we have done. So this is the demographic data. We are now at 203 patients that are distributed into 3 surgical arms, as you see in this table, with the controls on the right. There was a small but significant difference in age across groups, and our Roux-en-Y gastric bypass subgroup had a smaller BMI compared to the other groups. So all the data that I'll be presenting today are adjusted for age and initial BMI, and we did also a Bonferroni correction for the number of comparisons. So this is an ongoing study. We are still doing the testing and the recruitment. So this is the breakdown of the numbers that we have up to 24 months as of now. We had one patient, unfortunately, that deceased 8 months after a sleeve gastrectomy from pancreatic cancer. But overall, our retention rate was extremely good in the trial, with only 7 patients lost to follow-up, so 2.8% only. So this is the weight loss data in the clinical core component study. So you have on the left body weight and on the right body mass index, and you can see that all 3 surgeries, of course, induced significant weight loss. The biliopancreatic diversion is at the bottom, and it did significantly better in terms of reducing weight. The other 2 surgeries, the Roux-en-Y and the sleeve, did the same, so there's no significant difference between these 2 surgeries there. The control group did not experience any significant weight loss. So you have on the left the delta BMI that was significantly lower, of course, in the control group compared to the surgical arms of the study. And on the right, you have total weight loss. So the weight loss in terms of percent was around 42% for the biliopancreatic diversion, and it was more around 30% for the other 2 operations. Some metabolic parameters here. Over the follow-up, I'm showing HbA1c, fasting glycemia. They all improved in the surgical arms. The biliopancreatic diversion did slightly better, no difference between the sleeve and the Roux-en-Y. The difference for fasting glycemia, there's a lot more variation there, so we don't see as clear a pattern. And for OMA insulin resistance index, there was an improvement that was significant in all surgeries, but no difference between arms of the study. I added here the control group. We had 0 and 12-month data for the control group, so this is compared to 0, 12-month data for the surgical arms, and you see a very clear pattern where the control group did not experience any improvement in HbA1c, fasting glycemia, or OMA insulin resistance index, whereas all the surgical arms did improve significantly. In terms of diabetes remission, so if you consider either partial or complete remission of diabetes, at 12 months we were at 89% with the biliopancreatic diversion, and the 2 other surgeries fared equally well at 64% partial or complete remission. If you look at complete remission, it was 78% with the biliopancreatic at 12 months, and 36 and 41 for the Roux-en-Y or sleeve respectively, according to the definitions that are at the bottom of the slide for remission, or partial or complete remission. We tested many other outcomes in this study. Here's a few results on our Laval quality of life questionnaire. So you have the control group in pink, and you have the surgical arms in black, and all the surgical arms improved significantly in all the spheres of quality of life. That appears to be significant at 4 months and onward. So this is true for activity, mobility, personal hygiene, clothing, social interaction, sexual life, emotion. So the difference was significant between the control group and the surgical arms, no difference between the individual surgical arms. So to summarize the clinical core data, we now have a prospective control trial comparing the 3 surgeries to best medical treatment in severely obese patients with type 2 diabetes. The 3 bariatric operations are significantly superior to medical treatment for weight loss, type 2 diabetes remission of other comorbidities, as well as quality of life. Many outcomes are significantly improved after all 3 surgeries. The biliopancreatic diversion does slightly better than the others. And the sleeve and Roux-en-Y show similar benefits at 12 and 24 months. Now for the metabolism axis, I have the pleasure of presenting data that was generated by our colleague in the CHU Research Center in Sherbrooke, Dr. André Carpentier, and Dr. Anne-Marie Caro. So probably some of you know the work of Dr. Carpentier. He has a fairly established core to test metabolic effect and substrate fluxes using a fairly detailed protocol. So this one is a 9-hour protocol, 6 of which are in the postprandial state. So there's a liquid meal that is given to the patient. Lots of tracers are used. I will not have the time to address the specific details of this. I will only cover the FTHA studies that he has done using PET and CT scanning in those studies. So Dr. Carpentier has shown very well that this FTHA fatty acid derivative marked with fluoride, radioactive fluoride, it can be used as a signal of fatty acid uptake in the various parts of the body. So it generates this red signal on the figure there. And by using PET combined to CT scans, he can measure standard uptake values of free fatty acids in various regions of interest of the body. So this is what he's done in our study. So the patients that were used for this sub-study were 12 patients undergoing either sleeve gastrectomy or biliopancreatic, and it was a very short-term study. So they were tested before the surgery and then 10 to 12 days after the surgery. So the weight loss was significant here, but it was a minimal weight loss of 5.6% approximately. Lean mass did not change. Waist circumference did decrease significantly. So the main results that was found was that after surgery, so 10 to 12 days after surgery, fatty acid uptake by the heart was decreased dramatically and significantly. So this is an image on the left showing the patient before surgery, and you can see the heart there. I cannot point on the, but you can see the heart there, and the heart has less signal after 10 to 12 days. And this has been quantified by the mean SUV, so standard uptake values, and you can see uptake by the myocardium that is dramatically and significantly decreased after only 10 to 12 days following the surgery. The gray zone represents the values of a normal, non-obese, healthy control group. So after 10 to 12 days, bariatric surgery normalizes free fatty acid uptake by the myocardium in almost all the patients. So you have on the top left is the myocardium data that I just showed. In parallel to that, we saw no change in liver lipid uptake, no change in muscle lipid uptake, no change in abdominal subcutaneous adipose tissue uptake, no change in thigh subcutaneous adipose tissue uptake, but visceral adipose tissue uptake was increased significantly. So the slight reduction in body weight and waist circumference was enough to restore the function of adipose tissue. And this is what is shown by the rate of appearance there of the calculation of free fatty acid spillover from adipose tissue, which is derived from intravascular lipolysis of exogenous triglyceride-rich lipoproteins. And you can see that before the operation, spillover was very high, and it was reduced very significantly after the surgery. And both surgeries did the work. So you have the sleeve and the biliopancreatic diversion there that did reduce the spillover from adipose tissue. So our results suggest a short-term decrease in free fatty acid uptake in the heart that corresponds to improved storage function of visceral adipose tissue. And this is true for both the sleeve and the biliopancreatic diversion. The second vignette that I'm going to be presenting is work that was done by Dr. André Moret, Dr. Jonathan Schertzer at McMaster University, who both are in the room actually today, and Dr. Fernando Ferrati-Ange, who works with Dr. Schertzer at this time. So we wanted, of course, to characterize the fecal microbiota before and after surgeries, and these studies are ongoing, and we're going to do them. At the same time, we wanted to test the effect of the microbiota as a causal agent in the improvements that we see after the surgery. So we collected fecal samples before and after the surgeries, and then Dr. Schertzer did fecal transplant either in SPF mice, so standard mice, or germ-free mice. And the hypothesis was that a subset of bacterial communities or metabolites would drive some of the changes on metabolic outcomes, in this case, the glycemia. So here are the responders, the human patients who gave fecal samples before and after their surgery. Dr. Schertzer and his group selected 3 donors, and those, the fecal matter was used to do fecal transplant, either in SPF or germ-free mice. There was a control in SPF mice with autologous transplant. And there's a fairly long timeline for the treatment. And the reason for this, so the timeline was at week 3, week 7, and even week 8 of fecal transplant. And the reason for the length of the study is this publication by the group of Dr. Schertzer, where he has shown that the transfer of the effect of the microbiota on blood glucose take a long time to appear. You have the fecal transplant of SPF mice who were on a chow diet versus SPF mice on a high-fat diet that was transplanted to germ-free mice. And you see at 4 days of treatment, the effect is not significant on blood glucose, but at 45 days of treatment, the effect is significant. So it takes a long time for the effect to appear when doing fecal transplant. So the results are here. You have, on top is the FPF mice, week 3 and week 7 for body composition. So you have fat percentage, lean mass percentage, and then the germ-free mice at the bottom, so no change in body composition. So the fecal microbiota transplant did not impact body composition over the course of the study. Regarding glycemia, we see slightly beneficial effect of the post-surgery microbiota. Here you see 1 point was significantly lower, the blue curve, and a couple points here become significant at week 7, but the effects are much more pronounced at week 7 with the germ-free mice. So the effect of the fecal transplant, the post-surgery fecal transplant, are dependent upon time of exposure, but also on the presence or absence of a pre-existing microbiota. So this result tends to suggest that some of the metabolic benefits of the surgery are actually mediated, at least in part, by the microbiota. And the last result I would like to present is from our gut-brain axis, and these are results that were generated by our colleague, Dr. Alain Daguerre at McGill. They were done by Andréane Michaud, who was a postdoc at McGill, but I'm happy to report that she now has a position at Laval University School of Nutrition. So obesity has been related to alterations in brain structure that include a global and regional atrophy of gray matter, and also regional atrophy and decreased integrity and connectivity of white matter. And it is believed that these changes stem from the comorbidities that are associated with obesity, and that they could mediate part of the cognitive dysfunction that is observed in obesity. So the protocol was the following. Andréane took participants scheduled to undergo sleeve gastrectomy, and she did a MRI session before the surgery at 4 months and then 12 months after the surgery. And the results are the following. There was a widespread increase in white matter density at 4 months, and it was even more significant at 12 months after the surgery compared to baseline. And this started from the brainstem and projected out to other regions of the brain. There was also an increase in gray matter density of the brain. That was also widespread and even more significant at 12 months. It was in the hippocampus, temporal cortex, and cerebellum regions of the brain. Andrian also found in a different sample that obesity was related to reduced white matter and gray matter density in the exact same region. So our results seem to suggest a global recovery of these areas, the density of these areas after the surgery. So the main hypothesis here is that it is reduced inflammation and increased blood flow that would modify these density signals that we have in the brain. And the last part that I would like to present is the functional MRI studies that we have done. So we have done the food auction task, the Becker, de Groot, Marshak food auction task. And in this task, when the patients are in the scanner, they are shown 45 images of either high-calorie or low-calorie food snacks in 3 different runs. So that's a lot of image. And they have to bid on the image an amount of money that they would like to pay for these items. So this task, it really measures the subjective value of food or the willingness to pay for a given food item. So here are preliminary results. We have the baseline in 4 months, and there was no change in the mean bidding amount for low-calorie snack foods, but at 4 months, there was a significant decrease in the bidding amount for the high-calorie foods. And this was associated with a stimulation in the brain regions that are associated with cognitive control, namely the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and this was significant. So it seems that at 4 months, during the dynamic phase of weight loss, cognitive control is increased, and this may explain the mean bidding that is lower for the high-calorie snack food. We have very preliminary results showing that at 1 year, the mean bidding amount for the high-calorie snack food goes back up, and this precedes the well-known regain of weight that we see in this population after sleeve gastrectomy. So this part of our study is still ongoing, so we'll do further analyses, but I think we have a mechanism there that may underlie weight loss and weight regain after the bariatric surgery. So this brings me to my conclusion. The REMISSION study has now generated prospective data comparing 3 different weight loss surgeries to best medical treatment in a sample of diabetic patients with severe obesity. The biliopancreatic diversion with duodenal switch induced greater weight loss and comorbidity improvements compared to the other surgeries, but the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass and the sleeve gastrectomy did generate comparable results over 2 years. All surgical approach did better than the medical control group. And from the mechanistic standpoint, surgery induces a short-term decrease in free fatty acid uptake in the myocardium, which is related to improved adipose tissue storage function in the visceral fat. Some of the benefits of surgery on glucose homeostasis may be explained by the gut microbiota, and surgery restores some of the structural alterations of the brain which are associated with obesity. So this relates to an increased neural activity of regions associated with cognitive control. Now, this is a very busy acknowledgement slides. I would like to acknowledge the contribution of my co-investigators, so the whole remission study team there in the middle, my co-PIs, Dr. Laurent Bierteau and Denis Richard. I would like to pay tribute to the small but very effective management team of our remission study, in particular Mélanie Nadeau and Mélissa Pelletier, who are here in the room, and the bariatric surgery team, the Obesity Biobank, the collaborators, graduate students. We had help from Marie-Frédérique Gauthier, Isabelle Croteau as well, and the funding agencies. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, we thank you very much, Great presentations. We have some time, a few minutes for some questions and comments from the audience. Our speakers are here. They have mics. If you'd like to ask a question, please do so. Yes, please.
Really interesting topic of bariatric surgery. Do people have a good hypothesis regarding the mechanism whereby the pancreatic diversion breeds not just more weight loss, but it seems to kind of take longer to plateau?
The weight loss is really more durable. Sorry about that. The weight loss is really more durable with the biliopancreatic diversion. I think the malabsorption is really what does the trick. In the long term, even if food intakes increases back up again a little bit, the malabsorption will compensate. Even though the intestine will adapt and eventually be able to reabsorb a little more in terms of its reduced length, still it seems to be doing something in terms of reducing the calories that are absorbed. We cannot exclude hormonal effects, GLP-1, GIP, so some of those hormones are modified as well. So,
yes, please.
Geoff, have you done any studies about qualitative studies to assess what families and kids think about the 4 M's and how they think about those outcomes intervention?
Yeah, so what do families think about the 4 M's? I'm not aware, I don't think we've done any yet, or I don't think any, at least in our team, we haven't done any. I mentioned that in Hamilton and Ottawa, they're using it. Stasia, I know the work she's done with primary care physicians, so family docs and I think general pediatricians who refer to their program. The referral form includes information about classifying kids according to those 4 M's, which is, I think, partly to introduce the idea of complexity of obesity beyond BMI and encouraging them to screen and to at least think about these other sorts of things, not just doing a quick BMI and then sending it off and making it, you know, passing it on for someone else to then address. So they're trying to do a bit of work in that sense. But it's funny, I was having a conversation earlier today with someone about families' perceptions of obesity as a chronic disease or as a chronic condition or however you want to frame it. And I'm not aware of any work in that domain. We often ask families about what do they think about in terminology, what sort of terms should we use when we talk about weight and health, but yeah, I'm not aware of any yet. So,
could you identify yourself as you ask your question?
David Lau from Calgary. Thank you both, Geoff and Andre, for the excellent presentation. The question is for Andre. I guess it's somewhat controversial, but I think now we think of bariatric surgery as nothing other than changing the hormonal and metabolic milieu. And clearly, the BPD is a superior procedure if you're looking at the 3 procedures combined. And I'm wondering, in terms of what your thoughts are in terms of looking into the future, number one, identifying who are the candidates who will respond, number one, and number two, the other approach of looking at it, it doesn't really matter who, whoever that undergoes the surgery, really we're talking about rearranging the metabolic and hormonal milieu. And whether there are other concomitant things that we can do to facilitate or augment the surgical response.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for asking. The first issue really relates to who should be receiving the biliopancreatic diversion, and right now, it's a surgery that requires extensive management of the side effects related to malabsorption. So, right now, only very motivated patients and very compliant patients are chosen for this operation. So it cannot, it's not a very popular operation. Also, it's difficult from the technical standpoint because it has 2 anastomosis. Now, there's a new version of the biliopancreatic diversion that is a single anastomosis switch that may take on in terms of popularity. And the common segment of the intestine is slightly longer with this operation. So it may reduce the malabsorptive side effects. So it may be a good compromise between the standard biliopancreatic and the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass that could take on in terms of popularity because of its simplicity from the surgical standpoint. But you are right, I think it's modifying the hormonal milieu. And so, yeah, it will remain a complex issue.
I think our last question.
Sure, Kevin Hall, NIH. I just wanted to, Andre, this is a question for you. I just wanted to make sure I understood some of the data that you presented because your conclusions about these, for example, free fatty acid uptake changes in the heart and visceral adipose tissue. You showed them separately, the actual data, but what you didn't show, but seemed to be in the conclusions, was that there was correlations within subjects on those two things. Is that actually the case? They were significantly correlated? In other words, if you plotted individual decrease in free fatty acid uptake by the heart against individual increased free fatty acid uptake by visceral adipose tissue, that was a significant correlation?
I don't have the specific answer, so
Okay.
I will have to look the data in more detail.
And then I guess the similar question was with respect to the brain, the anatomical changes in the brain, and then the functional changes in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Were those correlated? Do you know that?
I think they are, yes.
Okay.
In that case, yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, given that we are at the top of the hour, please join me in thanking our speakers for very informative talks. Great to hear the outputs from your research efforts. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.